Hi everyone, I'm Montana, and my guest today is the amazing Bartholomew Broadbent, Broadbent Selections, and very fun topic today. We are taking a little journey to Portugal. We have a great new lineup, and I think before we get into the wines, Bartholomew, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and Broadbent Selections, and then also how you kind of got into working in Portugal with your family, your father before you?
Broadbent Selections is a wine importer. We're based in Virginia. We were established in 1996, and we import wines from all over the world, including places like Beirut, Chateauneuf, and Spy Valley in New Zealand. We have the largest, I should say the top portfolio of South African wines. Basically, we represent wines from all over the world. But today we're focusing on my own brand, the Broadbent brand. Basically, I moved to the United States in 1986, and my job was to teach Americans about port all over the country, traveling all over the country. Well, okay, funny story. I was just going back. I was brought up in England, and my father, Michael Broadbent, was in the wine trade. He started the wine auctions for Christie's, and he wrote books about wine, and he wrote the Decanter magazine for 433 consecutive months. And I, after a little stint in Cognac and then Australia, doing a couple of harvests there, I went back and worked for a wine merchant in London in the Pall Mall, which is the St. James's area where all the gentlemen's clubs are, not the strip clubs, the sort of fancy clubs with leather armchairs. And one day, one of my clients came into the shop after a boozy club lunch, and we had the directors of LI breweries downstairs in a board meeting, so I had to keep this quiet. So I shoved him in a cupboard, gave him a glass of sherry, and locked the door. And every 20 minutes, I opened the door and filled up his glass. And after 5 glasses, he said they'd like you in North America. And it turned out he was consulting some Canadians, got me a job in Montreal. Then I got moved to Toronto. And that's where I met the family I worked for, starting from 1996. So I moved to Canada in 82 when I was 20, and moved to San Francisco in 86 to work for this family, and then 96 started Broadbent Selections.
Oh wow, Portugal is amazing. It's just one of these places where, like, I think unless you've been there, you kind of know like what kind of a travel experience you can have there. But I'm sure that once you set foot there, you get a little bit sucked in. Yeah,
I mean, Portugal, the Douro Valley is arguably the most beautiful wine region in the world. A lot of people will say the Cape is in South Africa. But honestly, I think Madeira is the most stunningly beautiful place in the world for wine. And we're not talking about Madeira today, but my background was that whilst I was working for this family in Portugal, they purchased the Madeira Wine Company and asked me to start selling Madeira in America. It had been absent since Prohibition. So really it was relaunching the category of Madeira in America, and we did that in 1988/89. And so I'm very much specialized in Portugal, port, and Madeira. And we have our own brand of Madeira, which I guess we'll talk about another day. It's got a full range of Madeiras, and it's fantastic fun. We'll talk about Madeira, but we've also got the Vinho Verde. A lot of people know that wine.
Absolutely.
I think you've got a bottle of the rosé.
I got a bottle of the rosé here. I love this wine, and so does everybody else. We can hardly keep it in stock because it's so. Joe and I call it our lunchtime wine because it's lower alcohol. You can drink a bottle and go back to work, which we can do with a lot of things. But we're seasoned professionals.
And you would have it because it was Cosmopolitan's most favorite rosé for the summer. So no wonder you're so hip and fashionable that you would automatically have it. It's only 10% alcohol. The white, which is more famous, is only 9% alcohol. So you can drink I mean, someone like you, Montaigne, you'd have to have a whole bottle of this.
Yeah.
So you need 2 bottles for 2 people.
I'm at high altitude though, you know?
By the way, the little flower on the label, it was painted by my niece when she was 4 years old. It was a Christmas card. It was sitting on my fridge. And when we were going through designers, label designers, they kept coming up with these boring designs. And I said, this is a fun wine. It's not a serious wine. It's just a good, simple wine. What we need is something like that. and we used it. And it's been a huge success, except my niece now is 21 and saying, hey, where's my commission, whatever she's asking for. But
right. Well, good for her.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
It's so sweet. I love that. And this also, we've made some really fun cocktails with this wine as well. It makes for a great little topper. Like we did a gin and cucumber cocktail for Mardi Gras that was really fantastic with the Vinho Verde. It was just perfect.
And then we used that flower to expand the range, where you can see that the same flower is featured on the 3 new table wines from Portugal. And I wanted to have some table wines because we were representing some table wines which belonged to the port company we were representing. And when we handed over the whole lot to their own import company, which made sense, we wanted to make our own table wines. And we started, I was going to do a Douro white until I came across this wine, which is a Dao white. It's spelled D-A-O, Dao white.
Okay.
It's a region. Dao is a region. And don't ask me what grapes are in it. You can list all the grapes. We won't talk about grapes today. You can list the grapes on a sort of spreadsheet if you want. But there's so many grapes in Portugal, with over 200 used for port. So I'm not going to start listing all the True Nationals and Truriga Francescas and Tincaos. You'd sort of fall asleep in 2 seconds. The idea of this Dao white, I just fell in love with this because after 35 years of dealing with the Portuguese and getting to know the Portuguese, I've established relationships with some of the greatest vineyards and winemakers in Portugal. So I'm not a winemaker per se, I'm a wine producer. So we produce this wine, but we have winemakers who make it for us. And I fell in love with this Dao white. I was going to do a Douro white, and then we decided last minute, no, we're going to do a Dao white. And we did this. So the idea of this wine is it's just really refreshing. Actually, it probably cannibalizes the Vinho Verde. They're both incredibly refreshing wine. But the Vinho Verde has its applications. It's fantastic on its own. It's the best wine with Caesar salad. It goes with all sorts of things, seafoods. This wine can go with all of those, but I would also add things like a little bit more substantial chicken dishes and things like that. The acidity is what's gorgeous about this wine.
Super long lasting. So, and is there any of the major varieties that you would compare this to flavor profile wise?
I think anyone who likes Sauvignon Blanc would love this. Anyone who likes Gruner Veltliner would love this. Those sort of things. It's not your heavy Chardonnay grape. It's not going to appeal to the person who only wants woody Chardonnay.
Well, that person only wants that, and you can't,
Yeah.
So this is a stainless steel vinification.
Yeah. So whereas the Vinho Verde would still appeal to those people who like Sauvignon Blancs and things like that, but it would also appeal to people who like Prosecco's and
yes, because it has that little effervescence.
Yeah, exactly. The next wine is the Douro Red. This is a blend from the Douro Valley, and so the 5 or 6 principal grapes are Touriga Nacional, Touriga Francesca, Tinta Cao, Tinta Rouge, Tinta Amarela, and Tinta Barocca. But some of these would come from, some of the grapes would come from older field blend vineyards, which may have other grape varieties. When I started in the port business in '86, there were 28 grapes known in the region. 6 of them were white, made for white ports. And then the other 22 were red grapes. But since DNA came out, they've discovered over 200 varieties now. So I stopped, I memorized those 6 names and then decided I'm not going to waste my memory bank with anything else.
So tell us a little bit about, so we have the white from the Dow and then the red from the Douro. We talked a little bit about how incredibly beautiful the like terraced vineyards of the Douro Valley are, but from a perspective of like vineyard and fruit sourcing, how did you, this has to do with like the relationships you had with growers and winemakers where they were choosing the sources or any specific reason?
So the guy who makes my 2 Douro Reds is the same guy who makes Franco, who makes the very, very iconic Bartholomew, the most famous wine in Portugal, Bartholomew, which has been made since the 1950s, only in the best years, only maybe 20 times since the 1950s, and it's $600 minimum a bottle. It's the only iconic wine in Portugal. It's like the Vega Sicilia of Portugal, or the Grange Hermitage of Portugal, or the Sassicaia of Portugal. These things.
It's quite a talent on the project. That's so cool.
Yeah, so it's the same guy who makes this, and he's an incredible talent. So he knows how to make inexpensive wines. I'm not pretending this is the best wine in Portugal. What I'm trying to do with this is to make a really nice, enjoyable, everyday wine to go with pizza, pasta, burgers, grills, little steaks, that sort of thing. That's, to me, wine is an everyday drink, and this is sort of everyday pricing. Then we also have a reserve, which has a little bit more oak structure to it, a little more depth. So the reserve I opened today for lunch, and a little bit more richness and concentration. And it's jammy, juicy. It's got, what I like about these wines is they have good weight, good texture, reasonable alcohols. That's only 14%, the other one's 13%. And the reserve is a little bit more expensive. It's maybe in the 20s. But compared to other people's reserves, which usually start at $45, I think this still represents very good value. I do this, maybe this is my weekend wine, whereas that would be an everyday wine. And this one I do with a slightly more juicy steak, a little bit of fat, as you mentioned earlier. A little bit of fat on a trim would be delicious to go with this. But I'd still eat it with pizza and pasta and other sort of everyday stuff that you'd have for dinner.
We have to talk a little bit about the river. The Douro, like that's what makes the valley, right? And it's so epic. I went there in 2015 and I drove up in the dark because we left Porto and so I couldn't see where I was. And then in the morning, it's like, I opened the window of this house I was staying at. You were kind enough to have us stay at Dona Antonia's house, which was like unbelievable privilege to stay there. But like looking out over those rolling hills, it's truly, and I only say that because I know we're going to get into port, and I think it's worth like knowing and understanding that how the river kind of feeds down into the ocean, and there's these dry wines being made up in the hills there, and the winery's up there probably, right?
Yeah, usually I recommend people take the train up the river because it's one of the most scenic rivers in the world. And yeah, but once you get there, it's magical. It's worth the suffering. But if you can take the train, that would be better.
Good to know. I didn't even know about that.
Once you get the train up there, you can probably catch a taxi. But also the train is quicker. There are parts of the Douro where you can catch a train for 10 minutes and be at the next train stop. And if you were to drive, it would take about 2.5 hours because of the twisty hills and mountains you have to go over. But it's one of the most stunning views in the world is the Douro River, especially the quintas, which you were saying in they're sort of on top of the hills and they have magnificent views.
Magnificent, absolutely.